is End of the Middle by Richard Dawson. And this was my pick. So yeah, I'm glad to go first, so I can get in some nice words before. I was expecting the double whammy, but it would just be a single whammy calling afterwards. Yeah, Richard Dawson. So entry point, probably like you, Karl, 2020. That album, which was I just kind of find it fascinating, actually, just in terms of why he decided to do it. The fact it's called 2020, but it was a 2019 album, and obviously the now kind of chilling hindsight of an album with 2020 as well. Um, and yeah, just how that kind of broke him into the mainstream, and it's that album 2020 is I mean, probably in the 2010s that would be very high up for me. So that was the entry point. Seen him live since, explored a bit of his back catalogue. He's this just another prolific artist, and yeah, I suppose to give the context up to 2020, previously his album content had referred to your more classical folk takes. So I think 15th century. I can't remember the profession, but there's a whole album dedicated to someone in the 15th century, in Hexham in Northumberland, which is where he's from, and most of his stuff prior to 2020 is of that ilk, really. He also has these other side projects he works on with some of his musical collaborators. But yeah, for 2020, he apparently, and reading through interviews, he decided to basically continue with his folk shtick, updated to kind of modern day parlance and things which were on his mind at the time, but said it's rock music, and it's just it ended up being just a fantastic, unique album, and suddenly he had this much bigger fan base than he did before. So then, yeah, he followed that up by joining Finnish rockers Henki, I think it was, on this this kind of prog rock album, which was fairly decent in 2021, and then in I think 2022, it was his follow up full length, which began obviously with a 45-minute opener, which yeah, the Ruby Chord was the name of the album. As much as I wanted to get into that, the 45-minute opener, and considering it was a sort of normal track list, was fairly prohibitive in how far I was going to get into that. So quite frankly, it's not one I have properly got into. But it almost is like putting him back on the footing of back to what he was at the start, I suppose. And this 2020 being the kind of anomaly in his discography. But yeah, back with a new one, and End of the Middle. I think for him and his style of music, this is kind of playing it down the middle, Route One, kind of Richard Dawson. Musically, it's very spare. We've got 9 tracks here. There's not an awful lot to get your heartbeat up, your pulse racing. Certainly in the first 8 songs at least. But what we have are his kind of USP. So great lyrics, and ones which I sort of really grew to love, and I think you can even take them just out of context as just great little snapshots into family life, which is basically what this is all centered about, and just different snapshots of what it's like being a family, and various episodes. Bolt is this ridiculously spare opener, really, and almost too spare to kind of warrant it being a standout on this album, where essentially it's about a lightning bolt crashing into the house. My interpretation is that it's actually saying a bit more, and what's good about this for the album is that it's like having something upend your normal life is basically my fairly straightforward take on it, even if the lyrics just are a bit more Donnie Darko kind of house being ruined by some physical event. Gondola, one of the singles preceding it, is written from the perspective of a grandma who just never has got to live out the dreams which she's wanted in her life, and then decides to use some of her savings to take a daughter on holiday and goes in a gondola. It's got the very evocative lyric of "dreams died like dolphins in nets." So, but really affecting song, and certainly in the lead up to this and seeing him live in Reading at the end of last year, this was the one which stood out for sure. You got Bullies, which is a weird, almost unfinished narrative arc of kind of being bullied, and then he's a father and his son is the bully. But that's it. So I kind of feel a bit like Bolt. It feels like neither of those quite get to where they should do. But then Bolt, I suppose, at least is more justifiable as an opener. The question, your favourite, Karl, is based on a true story of family members he knew, or friends rather, in a house. They sort of see this ghost and then look into the history of the house and realise it's to do with the station master who lived there years ago and killed himself. So that's fairly bleak, but yeah, puts a bit of context onto that one, and the reason for some of the lyrical misdemeanors from the perspective of said ghost. And then yeah, Boxing Day sales, just kind of a bit of a retail therapy takedown. Not is a wedding, not really feeling like it. Polytunnel, the joys of working on an allotment. And then for me, the best is saved for last. So track 8 and track 9. 8 is Removals Van, which, like the previous 7 tracks, sort of musically doesn't do an awful lot. But having appreciated the lyrical content throughout, this one in particular, I think is a kind of masterpiece in terms of the way it's written, and how, like, whilst clearing out his house, it's completely interspersed with memories from childhood and a very unhappy childhood, and hopes of better days ahead as they move into a new home with his wife and a child on the way. So this one for me is the absolute standout. And then for something completely different, but still kind of the narrative arc being very faithfully adhered to, is More Than Real, where you kind of get a similar theme to Removals Van, I suppose, but kind of fears about becoming a father and repeating the mistakes of his own. And it then ends with these female lyrics. I mean, musically, this is a complete divergence from the rest of it, which was just really spare. This one is kind of bold synth. It kind of has you banging your head against the wall going, why have you not bothered with the rest of them in such a way? Because it just shows that he can do it as well, and we know it from 2020 as well. So there we go. But it's worth it. And yeah, you basically get the female vocals, which is kind of from the daughter's perspective, and essentially, it's, for me, this is like a pop music version of Les Mis, in the sense that the daughter is, whilst the original protagonist of the song is falling to ill health, she loves him. So he's basically he's banished those fears, and considering this is an album about family life and stuff, this feels very apt as a closing track, because it's basically saying that is the absolute pinnacle, to be loved by those who are in your family. So it's a really affecting one, and like I say, those two kind of blow the rest out of the water in a sense. But overall, I think it narratively, I absolutely love the album. Musically, it can be a challenge, and I think it will be prohibitive to kind of extending his fan base. So it's kind of in the middle on that front. But yeah, a really useful one. And yeah, I suppose the ask now is that for the next project, we just see a little bit more creativity on the musical side, because that is probably the bit which is sorely lacking. But I think sorely lacking might be a bigger theme in your review, Karl.
I mean, I'll say this. I mean, I'll start by saying I've always struggled with Richard Dawson. So I mean, I think I've just kind of come to the terms that he's just not for me. And it's interesting you're talking about 2020, because that's not actually one that I've listened to.
You haven't listened to it?
So that's not one that I've listened to.
Right.
So maybe that's one that I should go back to if you're saying it's quite different. I mean,
the entry for non-Richard Dawson fans.
Right, there you go. So,
but then it will make you scratch your head around the rest of it.
yeah, I might give it a go. But I mean, as you say, his music and style definitely required taste. Very much a Marmite artist. I think that if you like him, you really like him, and then if you don't, it's just like not for you. And I'm definitely in the latter camp, I would say. I remember trying. So the two that I've listened to are Peasant and Ruby Chord. I just remember them. So highly acclaimed, was on so many year-end lists, and Ruby Chord in particular, I remember that like really like great cover for it, with the guy with everything on his back, looks a bit like Asterix, the cartoon. That's what he looks like on the cover. But I remember trying with Peasant when that came out, and similarly, very highly acclaimed, just couldn't get into it. But like, from what I understand from you, that's like his typical, like very folky, less experimental kind of stuff. And then Ruby Chord, like I say, similar story on all these year-end lists. But just couldn't get into it. But with this one coming in under an hour, and I saw quite a few reviews saying, this is his most accessible work. I thought, okay, this might be the one to finally hit, but maybe it sounds like 2020 is the one to give it a go rather than this one, because
I would argue that's more accessible.
Yeah, for sure. But for me, this one was a similar story. Like, all the points you said narratively, like lyrically, I find him an interesting. He's this great observational kind of storyteller, and I do like some of the warm folky textures. Gondola, you weren't so big on Boxing Day sales, but that was one that I really enjoyed. And then that one that you mentioned, the final track of Sally Pilkington, where you get those beautiful harmonies and that kind of jazzy instrumentation coming through. That's when it's at its best for me, and it does touch the same nerves as like Ness or Black Country New Roads, Ants from Up There. This kind of like, otherworldly but like quite natural sound that it's got going on. But it's just one of those where those moments, for all those few moments, for me, there's double the amount that I just find really grating. And for me, it is mainly down to Richard's voice. I just personally find it, rather than like emotionally affecting, I find it quite jarring. And you obviously mentioned The Question. That was the one where I was like, this is getting too much. This is just not fun anymore. So I think it's one that, after playing this front to back, I really struggled and found it like hard work to revisit in full. I think it's definitely, one where there's moments that I'd happily dip into. And, the last track in particular, as you mentioned, that was kind of the light at the end of the tunnel. It was kind of like it made it all worthwhile just to get to that right at the end. But I appreciate Richard Dawson and his artistry, but he's just one of those artists that you got to hold up your hands up and say, this one's probably not for me.